Hey, good morning, real life. My name is Adam McElderry. I have the pleasure of being on staff here as one of our pastors. Before I go too much further, I just want to say thank you because I know some of you are here today. For those of you who were able to make it yesterday and help us with our church cleaning day, the place looks great. I just appreciate you guys being a part of us being good stewards with what God has blessed us with, which is this building where we are able to operate out of and do ministry on the Palouse. So thank you all for that. Mitch said, Resurrection Sunday is coming soon, which means, that is the high holy day on our church calendar. And it also means that we are smack dab in the middle. Mitch said that same phrase twice. Must be the phrase of the day. Smack dab in the middle of Lent. If you don't know what Lent is a season of self-sacrifice, self-denial. And it's not every year that I decide to give something up for Lent, but this year my wife and I did together. And we chose to give up watching TV. And what we've discovered in the midst of these last several weeks is we were using this as a great coping mechanism for ourselves. Like we'd get home and we'd be tired, emotionally drained or mentally drained, and we'd just throw a show on TV and just go numb. And initially it was really difficult for us to cut this out of our lives, but it has been so beneficial for us as friends and as a couple. We have grown so much closer together, and I've really enjoyed this time. And I know that she would say that too, even though I've been kicking her tail in just about every board game that we play instead of watching TV. But it is such a great reminder for me why in healthy relationship that it is so important that we are making space for us to spend time together. That we are making space for people to be able to come into our lives and share our lives with one another. Now today, as we are continuing this series, God is with us, as we continue to tell God's story about how he is putting things back together. And we're going to look at something very similar to that. We're going to be talking about us creating space for our relationship with God. Now last week, if you remember, Josh started this series off and let us know and what God's intention was from the very beginning. When he created the earth and when he created humanity in his image, he did so that he could create this perfect space where we could exist together, being in perfect relationship. We call that place the Garden of Eden. And it was the place where God's place and man's space were together, right? You guys remember this graphic from last week? Heaven and earth are in the same place. We are able to experience our relationship with God in its fullness, in the Hebrew word shalom, wholeness, peace, perfect relationship. But unfortunately, shalom was shattered, wasn't it? See, Adam and Eve allowed an outside voice to come into their lives and influence them and deceive them into believing that God was holding out on them, that they couldn't trust God anymore. And so they did the one thing that he asked them not to, which was to eat from the tree of life, or tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was an act that ushered death into this perfect existence. And it separated our relationship with God. And now God's space and man's space could no longer be together, because an unholy humanity cannot be with a holy God. And hope seems to be lost. But it was not. Because from the very beginning, God put into place his plan to restore his creation back to that place where they could be in the same space once again. And this story really starts to kick off, really starts to gain steam in Genesis chapter 12, when we're introduced to a man named Abraham. God comes to Abraham and invites him to be a partner in this restoration project. And this invitation to partner is not something new. We saw it with Adam and Eve too. God had asked Adam and Eve to partner with him in caring for his creation and caring for one another. This last week in our life group, somebody brought up the fact that how cool it was that God actually asked Adam to partner with him in giving all the names to the animals. I thought that is really cool. Which, have you guys ever stopped to think what those names were? Like, what were the names that Adam actually gave to those animals? Because I doubt very many of them survived the course of time. And I wonder if he was better at it than we are. Because I don't know if you've ever stopped to look at some of the names of animals that we've given over our history. They're terrible. Let me just share a few with you guys, because I just thought you got to hear these things. I have some pictures of a couple of different animals. The top one, of course, you would name that thing a screaming hairy armadillo, because that's what it is. A screaming hairy armadillo. And this poor fish down here on the bottom screen, that's a sarcastic fringe head. What? And then one on the top there, obviously that's a frog or a toad, but why wouldn't we name it mountain chicken? We have done a poor job to these poor animals. But this invitation that God extended to Adam and now is extending to Abraham is just a testament about who he is. That he is a God that cares enough about his creation, that loves them so much that he wants them to be a part of what he's doing. And so when God comes to Abraham and invites him to partner with him, to follow him as his God, he tells him, if you follow me, I will be a blessing to you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. You will be a blessing to all the people on the earth because of you. God has got a great sense of humor, because here he is coming to Abraham and his wife in their mid-70s. They have no kids. They can't have kids. And he's saying, you are going to be the one that I make into a great nation. How many of you know that God's timing is not always our timing? How many also know that God always fulfills his promises? I do. And he does with Abraham as well. When Abraham is 100 years old, he gives him a son that he names Isaac. And his family grows. And by the time his family grows to be almost 100 strong, a famine hits the land that they're living in. And they have to relocate to Egypt just so that they can survive. And while they're there, they begin to flourish even more. And the family of Abraham is growing, filling the land. Eventually, a Pharaoh rises up to power that does not like this people. Actually, he's very threatened by them. He's afraid of their existence because of how large they have been growing. And he's worried that they're going to team up with one of his enemies to take him out and take over the land. So he decides to enslave them. And even in their captivity, God continues to bless this family and multiply it. Now, it seems like God forgot his people, but he did not. He did not forget the people, the family that he had chosen to be in relationship with, that would be a blessing to the entire world. Because when the time was right, yet again, God shows up with another invitation. And this time, it's to a shepherd in the desert named Moses. While Moses was in the Sinai desert taking care of his father-in-law's sheep, he notices off in the distance a bush that's on fire. But the thing that stands out to Moses is that this bush is not being consumed by the fire. So he goes over to check it out. And as he approaches, the voice of the Lord speaks to him for the very first time and introduces himself to Moses. He says, I am the God of your father. I am the God of your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I want you to partner with me. When Moses realizes where he's at, that he's in the very presence of God, this fire is no ordinary fire. This is the presence of God. He hits his face. And Moses creates space in his life to encounter this living God. And the invitation he receives from God to partner with him in this plan to restore all things means that he's got to go back to Egypt. He's got to go confront this Pharaoh and ask him to release God's people. He's going to be the one that brings them out from underneath the slavery and bondage they've been in for over 400 years, so that God can then fashion them into the nation that will be a blessing to the entire world. Now, as the story continues on, as God is putting this together, he sends Moses back. And initially, the Israelites are super excited about this. I mean, wouldn't you be if you were a slave for 400 years that you're like, we can finally be free of what's been going on? But the excitement quickly wanes as Moses goes to the Pharaoh and asks that he lets the people go. The request is denied and actually backfires on the people. And Pharaoh decides to make their lives harder and their labor harsher. And they become very angry with Moses. Why would you do this? Why would you make things more difficult for us? I thought you were going to rescue us. And Moses is disheartened. So God gives him a message to give to the people so that they know what it is that God is wanting, that he is inviting them into a relationship with him, that he is wanting to be with them. And that invitation we see the first time is in Exodus chapter 6. This is what God says. He says, therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. A promise of redemption. A promise of relationship. I will make you my people, God told them. But the people were too distracted and discouraged because of what was going on around them in their lives with what Pharaoh was doing, and they didn't hear the words that Moses said to them from the Lord. They were not ready to make room for him, to make room for that relationship that God was inviting them into. God moves on from here and he sends plagues to the land of Egypt to show Pharaoh and all the land who he was, to demonstrate his power, not just to Pharaoh and Egypt, but also to his people, to let them know, I keep my promises. I am who I say I am. And I am stronger than the power that has oppressed you for centuries. When Pharaoh finally relents and lets the people of Israel go, they are led out into the wilderness by a pillar of cloud in the daylight and a pillar of fire at night. God's very presence continues to be with them, letting them know that they are not abandoned, letting them know, I didn't just free you to go on out on your own and try to figure out what it looks like to be a nation and be a blessing. I'm going to go with you. In fact, I will lead you out into this. And he leads them to the Sinai wilderness and eventually to the base of Mount Sinai itself, where the people of Israel are going to encounter God wanting to restore all things and invite them into a relationship with him. And we can read about this in Exodus 19. Exodus 19, verse 3. After they were at the Mount Sinai, getting ready to encounter the Lord, this is what happens. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, this is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. As God is extending this invitation to be in a covenantal relationship with him, he lets them know that this is going to be one that you have to be an active participant in. If you're going to partner with God to restore all things, then you have to live in a way that reflects that restoration through obedience, through faithfulness, through trust. And this time, unlike in Egypt before, they are ready to accept. They are ready to make space for God in their lives. And as we read on in verse 7, we see this. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. And the people all responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. Have you guys ever agreed to do something that you didn't really know what you were agreeing to? There's been a lot of things in my life that I know I've done that with. But the one that comes most to my mind is when I was 20 years old and I agreed to become a husband and a father. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was a selfish, immature 20-year-old. I had no idea how to be a husband, how to be selfless. I only knew selfish. And to be a dad, like you parents out there know, they don't give you an owner's manual when you leave the hospital with your baby. I didn't know what I was doing. I had to figure it out on the way. Had to figure out how to be a selfless, loving husband and a good, honoring father that was bringing up their kids in the way. And it's been a long journey. But it's one, as I look back, that I would never give up. It's one that I know that I've wanted. And I think that's similar to what the Israelites may have felt at this moment. They didn't know exactly what they were agreeing to. How could they? They've been in slavery for over 400 years to an oppressive nation that had countless gods, that were oppressive gods that you could never know how to appease, and they had just a God for everything. So how would they know what it actually looks like to be in a relationship with a God who wants to love them? Actually wants to be with them, to care for them, and not exploit them or use them. So they may have been ready in this moment to say, yes, God, we want to be in relationship with you. Which, by the way, this relationship, throughout the course of the Hebrew Scriptures, is described as a marriage between Israel and God. And what happens here at Mount Sinai is the wedding. How are they supposed to have this relationship with this God? This holy God that we know from the beginning, who cannot now be with an unholy people. As you continue to look through Exodus 19 later on, it's in your notes, as God descends on the mountain in the pillar of cloud and fire again, they aren't even allowed to touch the mountain or they're going to die. So how are they supposed to be in a relationship with this God? Well, God spends the next year as they are sitting at the base of Mount Sinai, teaching them how. Teaching them the sacrificial system so that they can enter into his presence. Teaching them what it looks like for them to live differently to be different, because he is a God that is different. He's not the same kind of God that they are familiar with from Egypt, because he is a God who wants to be with them. A sentiment that is he says multiple times through the book of Exodus. One time, it's in Exodus 25. In Exodus 25:8, he says, "Have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you." As God was giving them all these things, all these laws and how to live, it wasn't just a list of things that they had to do to please him, because he wanted to be with them. He wants them to create a space that they can once again exist in the same place as he does. He wants them to know, like, when you leave here, you don't leave me on the mountain, you're taking me with you. You need to create a space for us to be able to be together. I want to live in the middle of where you are. And he gives them specific instructions of what this place is supposed to look like, this tabernacle, which just means a dwelling place. And it's very specific with the courtyard and the tent and the different spaces and all the different implements that are supposed to be used in the worship. And what is really profound for me in this whole thing, all this instruction that God is giving his people, is that he asks his partners to not be silent partners, but active partners, to have a part in what they are building. In Exodus 35, we read this. Moses says to the whole Israelite community, "This is what the Lord has commanded. From what you have, take an offering for the Lord. Everyone who is willing to bring to the Lord an offering." Just as God does for us today, he did for the Israelites then. He doesn't make you make space for him in your life. He wants willing, active participants. People who want to give of themselves to be a part of what God is doing. And as you read more into this chapter, you see that's exactly what happens. The nation comes together. And it says those who are willing, those whose hearts were moved, brought everything they had, earrings, necklaces, different cloths and skins from different animals, like everything they needed, the people provided in order for this space to be created where they could once again be with God. And at the end of all this, after this space is finally completed, we read this in Exodus chapter 40. Then the Lord covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. In all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, they would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. So the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle by day, and the fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels. God had given them a way where his space and man's space could once again be intertwined here in the tabernacle. And even after the Israelites, after this is built and they leave Mount Sinai and they break the covenantal relationship they said they wanted to be a part of, and then have to wander the desert for 40 years, even in the midst of that, God is still present in the tabernacle. The cloud is still there in the daylight. The fire is still there at night. So his people know, I'm still here with you. I'm not leaving you. I want to be in your presence. I want to live in the middle of your lives. And as I see it from the example that we have with the Garden of Eden and even with Israel and the tabernacle that they were asked to build for God, is that as God invites humanity to be in a relationship with him, to be a partner in his plan to restore all things back to that first intention where God's space and man's space are overlapping, that it is an invitation for us to make a space for him in our lives as well. It is an invitation that he has given us to make space for him in our lives, in the middle of our lives. And what that looks like is different for all of us, because we don't all live the same lives. Like, not all of you are parents of little kids who are just fighting to find space to be able to go to the bathroom by yourself. So how do you find space for God? What does it look like? And I can't necessarily give you the answer for that. But what I can tell you is, well, it's a little bit of a secret. It's not that difficult. It's not as complex as we think it is. Because, all right, I'll give the answer away. I hate to give away the ending of a show or a movie or a story, but here you go. This is why you can do it. Because God is with you. If you are a follower of Jesus, God is with you everywhere you go. That pillar of cloud, that pillar of fire, now resides inside of you. So it is possible for you to make space for him wherever you go, if you are willing, if your heart is moved so, like the Israelites were when they gave. You can make space for God, and you do so here every Sunday morning. We make space when we come together as a church family and lift up praises to him. You can make space in your life for God when you go to your life group and you discuss who he is and what he's doing in your life, and you hear the stories of what he's doing in other people's lives, and you learn more about who he is. You make space in your life when you go to a restoration class and you allow God into a space in your life that you weren't letting him into, that you were hiding, and he heals you in that area. We can make space in our life by forgiving one another, by loving our enemies, by fighting to be in relationship instead of being right when we're in conflict with one another. To make space for God is not as complex as we like to make it sometimes. He has made space for you. But will you make space for him? And that's the question I want to leave you with. Are you making space for God? Are you bringing to him a willing and moved heart, a desire to actually be with him and him with you? Where are the places in your life that you are not letting him into? And so as we go to communion today, I just want you to think about that. What space do you need to give open to God? If you're new with us, we get the opportunity to celebrate and remember Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection through communion every week. You don't have to be a member here, regular attender. As long as you are a follower of Jesus, we'd love for you to make space to celebrate this. We have some guys in the aisles who would bring something if you forgot to grab one of these. If you just raise your hand, they'll bring you an element. But I don't want to say much more about this. Just remember that God is a God who is with us. He is a God who is with you, and he wants to make space to be with you. But will you do the same? Because he did so here. He made a way for us to have space with him. Through this, what we remember. So as you guys are going out of here today, as we take this, and we remember that on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he broke the bread and he gave it to his friends and he said, "This is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Let us remember and think, where do we need to make space in our lives with him? And after the meal, he took the cup. He said, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Let us proclaim the space that he is creating for us. Let's pray. Father, Lord, I thank you for the story that you have been writing from the very beginning. A story where you want to be with us, your image bearers. And a story where you are making a way for that to happen. Lord, that you made a way through Abraham and his family in the tabernacle. And as we see that you continue to make ways throughout the rest of your story, God. So, Father, I just ask, Lord, that you will help us, each one of us, choose to be willing participants in your story, to partner with you in doing this, Lord, to look into our lives and find out where are the places that we are not giving you space. What things are we holding on to that we don't want you to see, that we don't want to give over control to you? Lord, reveal those to us today. And give us the courage, Lord, to let you into those places today. Because I know you will give us healing. I know that we will experience a God who restores anything and everything. So, Lord, I just pray that you will be glorified in that. And that as we leave here today, that you will be glorified and honored in all that we say, all that we do, as we make space to meet you in our week. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.